Cast your mind back to the night of the 29th of June, 2006 in Nuremberg, Germany. Portugal against the Netherlands. A last 16 match at the World Cup that began as a football contest and ended as something closer to a street fight. 4 red cards, 16 yellow cards, a referee who lost control so completely that the match became known by one name alone, the Battle of Nuremberg. It remains the most red-carded match in World Cup history, a record that stood for 20 years, a benchmark of football chaos that seemed, for 2 decades, entirely safe. Last night, in Mexico City, at a stadium that has hosted 3 World Cup opening ceremonies across 6 decades of history, the 2026 World Cup's very first match came within 1 dismissal of equaling it. 3 red cards, 2 for South Africa, who finished the game with 9 men, 1 for Mexico, who ended it with 10. A match that began with the color and noise of the grandest opening ceremony the tournament has ever staged. Shakira, Maná, Andrea Bocelli, Salma Hayek appearing as a surprise, and then descended, gradually and then all at once, into the kind of football that leaves everyone talking the next morning. Not all of it about the football. Mexico won 2-0. The result is clean on paper. The story underneath it is anything but. So what really happened at the Azteca last night, and what does it tell us about the World Cup that has just begun? Let's go through it from the beginning, because the chaos didn't arrive all at once. It built, and it built against a backdrop, an opening ceremony, a stadium, a history that made everything that followed feel both improbable and somehow entirely fitting for a tournament that has never done anything quietly. The ceremony itself was extraordinary. Shakira performed the official tournament song for her 4th World Cup opening ceremony, a record that only she holds. Maná brought the weight of Mexican rock tradition to a stage that 83,000 people were already vibrating with. Andrea Bocelli's voice filled the Azteca in a way that silenced the crowd. And then Salma Hayek appeared, unannounced, and the stadium exploded. Lila Downs welcomed the world in Spanish, English, Mixtec, and Nahuatl, the indigenous languages of this land, and in doing so, said something about what Mexico understands that the primary host of this tournament has struggled to express, that the world coming here includes people who were here long before this stadium was built, that welcome means something wider than a ticket and a seat. And then the football began. Within minutes, the match had its first significant moment. South Africa's midfielder, Sipepelo Yaya Sithole, made a heavy touch just outside the box. Mexico capitalized. Julian Huyons found the space that the error created and struck the ball cleanly into the net. Right foot, low. Ronwin Williams in the South African goal had no chance. The Azteca erupted. Mexico won, South Africa 0. The first goal of the 2026 World Cup scored inside the opening 10 minutes from a defensive mistake by a team who had spent the previous 11 days managing the disruption of a stranded flight in Johannesburg, a visa crisis involving their entire travel party, and the particular pressure of being told you almost didn't make it to the match you're now playing in. South Africa did not collapse. That is worth stating clearly, because the scoreline and the red card count might suggest a team that fell apart. They didn't. Hugo Bruce's side showed the same resilience that had carried them through a qualification group that included Nigeria, the continent's supposed powerhouse, who aren't at this tournament, while South Africa are. They organized, they pressed, they created moments. They reminded everyone watching that getting to 2-0 was going to require Mexico to work. And then the red cards started arriving. Yaya Sithole, whose heavy touch had led to the first goal, became the tournament's first dismissal. The details of exactly what earned him the red card in the second half added another layer of drama to an already tense match. South Africa, already behind, now down to 10 men. The mathematics of their evening had changed, but they kept playing, they kept competing, and that is a measure of something real about this team. Mexico pressed their advantage. Raul Jimenez came on, and what followed is the moment that will be replayed long after the red cards and the referee controversy have faded into footnotes. Jimenez scored. his first ever World Cup goal, at 35 years old, at his 4th World Cup, in a stadium he grew up watching, and he pointed to the sky, and the tears came, and the Azteca, 83,000 people who already loved him, understood in real time what they were watching.
This man was not supposed to be playing football at all. In November 2020, during a match in England, Jimenez rose for an aerial ball and collided with a defender. He went down and didn't get up. Emergency surgery. A skull fracture so serious that doubts were raised about whether he would ever return to professional football, let alone score at a World Cup. He came back. He wore the protective headguard that has become part of his identity. He kept scoring. He passed 45 goals for Mexico, making him the 3rd highest scorer in the national team's history. And then, in the months before this tournament, his father passed away. The man who had watched him through everything, who had been there through the injury and the recovery and the years of playing through pain. When Jimenez scored and pointed to the sky and the tears came, he was doing what footballers do when the weight of a life suddenly becomes too much to contain within the boundaries of the celebration. He was pointing at his father. In a stadium where the ghost of every great Mexican footballer who has ever played here was present in the noise of 83,000 people. He scored his first World Cup goal at 35, 6 years after a skull fracture that threatened his life, months after losing his father, in the stadium where he dreamed of exactly this moment. If you didn't feel that, you weren't watching. Then chaos reasserted itself. Madao broke forward for South Africa. Cesar Montes, Mexico's defender, attempted to stop him and fouled him outside the box. The referee reached for his pocket. Red card. Mexico down to 10 men as well. 3 red cards in the opening match of the 2026 World Cup, the joint 2nd most in any World Cup match in history, 1 short of the Battle of Nuremberg's 4. South Africa, 9 men. Mexico, 10 men. The final minutes of the opening match of the biggest tournament in football history looked less like the showcase the governing body had imagined and more like a sport testing the limits of what a referee can manage on the grandest stage. That referee, Wilton Sampaio of Brazil, had his own moment that spread across social media before the match was even over. FIFA has introduced a new communication system at this World Cup, in which referees use a stadium microphone to explain VAR decisions to the crowd. In theory, a step toward transparency. In practice, at the Azteca last night, when Sampaio took the microphone to explain the decision that led to South Africa's 2nd red card, almost nobody in the stadium could understand what he said. The clip spread immediately. The moment, a referee at the biggest match of the year, microphone in hand, delivering an explanation that generated more confusion than clarity, became a symbol or the kind of good intentions that don't quite survive contact with reality. It is difficult not to see it as a metaphor for several other aspects of this tournament. There is also the question of the hydration break. FIFA mandated 3-minute cooling breaks in the 22nd minute of each half across all matches, justified on player welfare grounds given the extreme heat conditions across multiple host cities. At the Azteca, at altitude in the evening, those conditions were less acute than they will be in Houston or Monterrey in the weeks ahead. But the break happened regardless, and when the cameras cut away from the pitch for 3 scheduled minutes of advertising, the commentary that filled social media was pointed and specific. Players get a compulsory hydration break. The same governing body that introduced that break attempted, the week before this match, to ban supporters from bringing water bottles into the venues. The reversal of that ban, announced after the British Prime Minister called it just wrong, was the right outcome, but its timing, arriving in the same week as the first compulsory player hydration break, illustrated a gap in institutional thinking that the opening night has not closed.
Now set all of that alongside what didn't happen at the Azteca last night. Omar Artan didn't happen. The CAF Referee of the Year, the first Somali ever to be selected for a World Cup, wasn't there. He spent 11 hours in an airport in Miami and was sent home. The man who would have been in that stadium, managing those red cards, explaining those VAR decisions in a microphone, was in Mogadishu. And within hours of the opening match ending, the news broke that UEFA had handed him the 2026 Super Cup final, the match between the Champions League winners and the Europa League winners, one of European football's most prestigious occasions. The organization that runs football on one continent stepped in and gave the referee that FIFA's host country had turned away one of the biggest nights of his career. The contrast was noticed, it was noted, and it will be part of the record of this tournament alongside everything that was decided on the pitch. Think about what the 2006 Battle of Nuremberg produced, beyond its reputation for chaos. It produced Manisha's goal. It produced the specific tension of watching a match where the referee had lost the thread and anything felt possible. Those moments of genuine, unplanned drama are the ones that embed themselves in the memory of a World Cup. Nobody planned the Battle of Nuremberg. Nobody planned for the 2026 opener to end with 9 men versus 10. Nobody planned for a referee's microphone explanation to go viral before the final whistle. These are the things a World Cup adds to itself, the chaos that the governing body didn't script and couldn't prevent. What do you remember about opening matches that set the tone for the tournaments that followed? South Africa's Sifiwe Tshabalala scoring that opening goal in 2010, the vuvuzelas, the feeling of a continent celebrating something it had been waiting for forever. France and Senegal in 2002, the defending champions losing to an African nation making the world take notice. Germany and Costa Rica in 2006, a 6-3 match that told you immediately this tournament was going to be about goals. The opening match of a World Cup carries weight beyond its 90 minutes. It announces something. It sets a temperature. Last night's match announced that the 2026 World Cup intends to be felt, that the football will not be polite, that the stories will arrive whether the governing body manages them or not, that a 17-year-old called Gilberto Mora, the youngest player from North America ever to appear at a World Cup, born after the 2006 tournament itself, can come off the bench at the Azteca on the opening night and make history without anyone having planned that chapter in advance. That Raul Jimenez can score his first World Cup goal at 35 and point to the sky and make 83,000 people feel the full weight of a human life in one gesture. That South Africa can arrive having been stranded on a runway, navigate a visa crisis, travel to the most famous stadium in football, and finish the night with 9 players still standing. This tournament has been surrounded by more institutional noise than any World Cup in living memory. The red cards and the tears and the microphone confusion and the hydration break and the shadow of an absent referee. None of that is what the governing body planned for its opening night. All of it is what the World Cup actually produced. And in the end, that is what this competition has always done. It takes what's given to it and makes something that nobody could have written in advance. What do you think last night's match tells you about the tournament ahead? Was the chaos of the opener a warning or a promise? And if a 35-year-old man who survived a skull fracture and recently lost his father can score his first World Cup goal at the Azteca with tears running down his face, does anything that surrounds this tournament actually matter as much as that? If you found this worth your time, a like helps more than you'd think. Subscribe if you enjoy thoughtful football coverage, and let me know your view in the comments. I read every one. Football at this scale is never just a tournament. It's a moment in time. And last night at the Azteca, it announced itself.